What happens when a self-made factory owner suits up as a warehouse grunt just to see how bad things have gotten and ends up hauling boxes beside a worker who collapses from exhaustion? Mason Zeller built his packaging supply company from his garage 15 years ago. Back then, it was just him, a beat-up pickup and a second-hand label printer. Now, it's 11 warehouses across 3 states with nearly 400 employees. Profitable, fast-moving, and efficient, at least that's what his district managers kept telling him. But lately, Mason was hearing too many half-truths, orders delayed, high turnover, a few complaints about safety standards. One warehouse in particular, Warehouse 7 in Dayton, had the highest turnover and lowest output. But the district manager, a guy named Ellis, kept blaming lazy hires and Gen Z work ethic. Mason didn't buy it. He hadn't set foot in Warehouse 7 in over a year. Most of the employees there had never met him. And thanks to mergers, new hires, and a corporate HR layer, many didn't even know what he looked like. That gave Mason an idea. He shaved his beard, dyed his gray hair dark brown, and borrowed an old delivery uniform from HR. A fake employee file was created under the name Matt Zane. His story: new temp worker just transferred from a closed location in Kansas. No one blinked twice. He arrived at Warehouse 7 on a Monday morning at 6:45 sharp. The outside looked clean enough, but inside it felt off. The air was stale, the lights in 2 aisles flickered constantly, and the break room smelled like burnt coffee and damp cardboard. The floor supervisor, a stocky man in his 30s named Chad, barely glanced at Matt before shoving a clipboard in his hands. "New guy, huh? Good, we're short again. Follow that girl over there, blue hoodie, name's Harper, she'll show you what to do." Mason turned to see a young woman pulling gloves over her hands, her long dark hair tied back. She looked tired but alert, focused. "Hey," she said, giving him a small nod. "You the Kansas guy?" "That's me." "Matt, all right, we're loading pallets for outbound. You ever work forklifts?" "Not really," she sighed. "Okay, then you're with me. Manual load. Grab a belt." The next 4 hours were non-stop. The boxes were heavier than they looked, and Mason quickly realized the pace was brutal. Most of the workers were young, sweating buckets, and clearly overworked. No music. No fans. No sign of water stations except a single old cooler at the far end of the floor. "You guys always this short-staffed?" Mason asked as he stacked another box on the pallet. Harper wiped her forehead. "Lately, yeah, we're supposed to be 16 on shift. Today we're 10. A few quit. One guy got hurt last week lifting wrong, no replacement yet." "Why not?" asked Chad. Mason glanced over at Chad, who had been standing by the office door for most of the morning, scrolling on his phone. Occasionally, he yelled at someone to hurry up. Never once did he lift a box. By noon, Mason's shirt was soaked through. Harper had barely taken a breath. He noticed she hadn't sat down once, not even during the 5-minute break. "You okay?" he asked as she wiped dust off her face. "Yeah," she said, her voice hoarse, "just low on sleep." "You eat anything?" "Didn't have time." "Water," she pointed toward the far end of the warehouse. "They only change it once a day, kind of warm, better than nothing." Back on the line, the boxes kept coming. Mason was trying to keep up, but something felt wrong. Harper had started to slow. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the next box. Then it happened. She reached for the top of a stack, paused, and staggered sideways. Her arms dropped. The box slipped from her grip and crashed to the ground. "Hey!" Her knees buckled and she collapsed right beside the pallet. "Harper!" Mason dropped down beside her. Hey, can you hear me?" She was out cold. "Somebody get help," Mason shouted. 2 other workers rushed over from across the warehouse. Chad yelled, "What happened?" "She she fainted, man," one of the workers snapped. "She's burning up." Chad walked over slowly, unbothered. "She'll be fine, she does this sometimes." "What?" Mason stood up, furious. "You're telling me she's passed out before and you didn't do anything?" Chad shrugged. "She's tough. Don't baby her, she'll get back up. You need to call someone now, she'll walk it off. We got quotas to hit." Mason's fists clenched. He looked down at Harper, pale and still on the floor, and something in him snapped. "Get her water and call an ambulance, now." One of the workers ran off. Chad looked annoyed. "You can't just start barking orders, new guy." Mason turned to face him, his voice low. "You have no idea who I am," Chad scoffed. "Yeah, what, you a union rep or something?" Mason stared at him, heart pounding. Not yet, not now, he couldn't blow his cover just yet. He crouched back beside Harper, gently lifting her head. "Hang in there," he muttered. "You're not getting ignored today." As the ambulance sirens wailed in the distance, Mason sat on the concrete floor of his own warehouse, holding the hand of a worker who'd nearly collapsed under the pressure he'd failed to notice from the top. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a CEO. He felt like a man who'd let his people down. The ambulance pulled away from the loading dock with Harper inside, the red lights casting long streaks across the cracked pavement. Mason stood off to the side, silent, sweat cooling on his back. No one spoke much after that. The floor crew went back to work slowly, quieter than before. Chad had returned to the office upstairs, slamming the door behind him. Only 2 workers had offered to help Harper. The rest had looked over in a kind of numb resignation, as if it were just something that happened here. Mason stayed through the end of the shift. He kept his head down, finished the pallets, and kept his observations to himself. He didn't speak to Chad again. Not yet. He needed to see more before confronting anyone. The next morning, he arrived earlier than the shift start. He parked across the street and waited in his car. From the front seat, he saw something he hadn't noticed the day before: 3 employees standing outside the side entrance, passing a single cup of coffee between them. They looked exhausted. One of them leaned against the wall with her eyes closed, as if stealing a few last seconds of rest before the day began. Mason stepped into the warehouse just before 7. The same flickering bulbs blinked overhead. The water cooler hadn't been refilled. The air felt damp again. Today, he was assigned to inbound unloading trucks and organizing inventory. A different crew, but the same vibe. Rushed, short-staffed, and tightly wound. His partner for the morning was a tall, wiry man in his early 50s named Devin. His hands were covered with old calluses and his voice rasped from years of yelling over machinery. "You're the new guy, Matt?" "That's right." Devin nodded once, then popped open the back of a trailer with a steel bar. "Hope you're ready to move." "We got 5 trucks today and only 4 of us." As they lifted crates onto carts, Mason noticed Devin moved with practiced efficiency, but stiffly favoring his left side. "You okay?" Mason asked. "I'm fine. Just a disc in my back that acts up when we're short." "You get any help for that?" Devin gave a dry laugh. "You mean like treatment?" "Nah, I asked for light duty. Chad said if I couldn't lift, I probably didn't belong here anymore." Mason clenched his jaw. "How long you been with the company?" 8 years. Seen 3 managers come and go. Chad's the worst. Doesn't like to be challenged. Keeps the district guy happy with numbers, though, so he stays." They worked in silence for a while. Mason noted the lack of safety mats, the broken corner of the loading dock that hadn't been flagged, and the way the carts had wobbly wheels no one had bothered to fix. Around mid-morning, Devin paused to stretch his back and nodded toward the office window above. "You see that?" Mason followed his gaze. Through the tinted glass, the figure of Ellis, the district manager, appeared. He was middle-aged with a pressed shirt and a pointed way of gesturing as he spoke to Chad beside him. "He only shows up when numbers dip," Devin said. "Then it's all threats about cutting hours or replacing people with contract labor." Mason kept his expression neutral. "They ever ask what's actually going wrong?" "Not once. They come in, look at charts, blame whoever's closest, and leave." After lunch, Ellis came down to the floor. He didn't introduce himself to the crew, just walked the aisles with a clipboard, nodding occasionally. When he passed Mason, he didn't even glance his direction. Chad trailed behind him, pointing at pallets and muttering statistics. As they moved past the inbound dock, Mason heard Ellis speak. "Turnover's killing us. Do we need to adjust hiring criteria?" Chad replied. "We're getting too many soft ones, can't handle pressure. We need workers who won't whine every time it gets tough." Ellis nodded thoughtfully. Well, don't let them slow us down. We're behind on Q2 targets already. They disappeared into the back office. Mason left the floor during the next break. He walked out the side door and called his assistant from a nearby alley out of view. Find me Harper's emergency contact. And get me a full employee report on everyone at Warehouse 7, including management. No summaries. I want raw data, she hesitated. Are you? Just do it. Quietly. Back inside, Mason rejoined the crew. Devon had been working without him for nearly 10 minutes and didn't complain once. But his movements had slowed. You should take a break, man. Devon shook his head. Only one more truck after this. Chad'll dock me if I don't finish my share. Mason grabbed the next box without asking and kept pace beside him. When the shift ended, Mason didn't head out with the others. Instead, he slipped upstairs and waited outside the office door. He could hear Ellis and Chad laughing inside. He knocked once and walked in without waiting. Chad raised an eyebrow. You lost, Matt? Ellis looked up from his laptop. You're one of the new temps. I am. Mason stepped fully inside, but I'm also Mason Zeller. The room went still, Chad's face drained of color. Ellis blinked, confused. I'm sorry. Mason reached into his jacket and pulled out the ID badge he'd hidden. The name Mason Zeller, founder and CEO, was printed clearly beneath his photo. I went undercover this week because I couldn't get a straight answer about what was happening here. Now I know. Ellis stood up slowly. Mason, I wish you'd told us you were coming. We could have prepared. I didn't want you to prepare. I wanted the truth. Chad opened his mouth, then closed it. I watched a worker collapse yesterday. I saw another today pushing through an injury just to keep his job. Your safety protocols are non-existent. Your staffing is a joke. And your leadership, he looked directly at Chad, is reckless. Chad tried to recover. Look, Harper's been told to take it easy before. She pushes herself too hard. That's on her. No, Mason said. That's on you. You created a system where asking for help is punished. Where people are disposable, that ends now. Ellis raised his hands slightly. We can review the procedures. Maybe bring in a consultant. Mason cut him off. You're done managing this district, effective immediately, and Chad, clean out your office. You're relieved. Chad stammered. You can't. I just did. He turned and walked out, leaving the silence behind him. Downstairs, the night crew was trickling in. Devon was sitting on a bench, rubbing his back. Mason walked over. I'm going to fix this place, he said. Devon looked up wearily. People have said that before. I mean it, you'll see. He turned toward the exit, stepping into the early evening air. His phone buzzed, a message from his assistant. Harper's awake, her sister's with her, they're at Dayton General. Mason took a breath, then headed to his car. He wasn't going back to corporate just yet. Not until he'd seen this through himself. Mason kept both hands on the wheel as he drove through the city, following the GPS toward Dayton General. The streets were damp with leftover rain, and the sky was the kind of pale gray that made everything look washed out. His phone buzzed again in the cup holder. Another unread message from his executive assistant. He didn't check it. He pulled into the hospital parking lot and sat for a moment. His shirt still smelled faintly of dust and cardboard. He hadn't changed since the shift ended. When he finally stepped out, the air was cooler than he expected. Inside the ER wing, the receptionist didn't ask questions when he gave his name. She pointed him toward a hallway near the back. Room 1123. He found it halfway down the corridor, curtain drawn halfway across the doorway. As he approached, a woman's voice filtered through. She's awake now, but they've got her on fluids. Doctor said it was a mix of dehydration and overexertion. Then a younger voice, groggy but clear. I just need to get back. I've missed too many shifts already. You're not going anywhere tonight. You nearly passed out on concrete. Mason stepped just inside the room. Harper lay on the bed and Roman 4 in her left arm. Her eyes were open, though tired. A woman in her late 20s sat beside her, arms crossed. They both turned as he entered. You're the guy from the warehouse, Harper said. He nodded. Mason Zeller, the older sister, stood. You're the owner. I am. She didn't move from her spot. Her jaw tightened. I'm not here to make excuses, Mason said. I came because what happened to Harper shouldn't have happened, and because I needed to see that she's okay. Harper shifted on the bed, wincing slightly. I thought you were just another temp. That was the point, he said. I needed to see things for myself. The sister stepped closer. You want to fix something? Start with not letting people work themselves sick. I already started, Mason said. The manager's out, so is the district lead. I'm taking over the site directly for now. Harper's eyes widened slightly. You fired them, they are done, and I'm not just here for damage control. Whatever's been allowed to fester in that warehouse, it stops now. The sister looked skeptical. Words are easy. I agree. That's why I'm not talking to you from a boardroom. Harper let out a slow breath. You're really going to run the site? For now, yes, and I want to talk with you when you're up for it. Not just about what happened, but about how things got to this point. The sister still looked wary, but she didn't press further. Harper nodded once. All right, I'll talk, but not tonight, of course. Mason gave a small nod and turned to leave, pausing in the doorway. Get some rest. We'll hold your spot. No one's docking you for this. Back in the car, Mason made 3 calls. The first was to HR. He needed a temporary on-site liaison with authority to authorize immediate changes. The second was to facilities management. He wanted a full safety audit on Warehouse 7 within 48 hours. The third was to logistics. He needed to know how much flexibility they had in rerouting volume to neighboring warehouses. By the time he returned to the site the next morning, a few things were already in motion. He arrived just after 6 and met with the early shift crew in the break room. There was no formal announcement, no cameras, no podium. Just Mason in work boots and a plain jacket, standing in front of the grimy vending machines. I'm not here to waste your time, he said. I've seen what you're dealing with and I'm not proud of what I found, but I'm here now and I'm staying until it's fixed. No one clapped. A few people exchanged glances. One person, an older woman with a brace on her wrist, folded her arms and leaned back against the wall. I know some of you don't believe anything's going to change, and I don't expect you to trust me because I say the right things. So let me show you instead. He stepped back and motioned toward the side entrance. There's a rep from HR in the office now. Her name's Tasha. If you've got safety issues, harassment claims, anything that's been ignored, she'll take it directly, and she reports to me. Still, no one moved. I also authorized overtime bonuses for last week's shifts. You'll see that reflected in Friday's check. That got a reaction. A few eyebrows raised. A younger guy near the door muttered something under his breath. Mason didn't catch it, but it didn't seem hostile. He added, and one more thing. If anyone's working hurt, I want to know. Effective immediately, we're bringing in a third-party occupational health consultant to review job roles and restrictions. If you've been ignored, that ends today. No one applauded, but the room felt different when he left, less guarded if only slightly. He spent the first half of the day walking the floor again, this time openly. He didn't carry a clipboard. He didn't point at things or make declarations. He asked questions. He listened. Devin showed up for the late morning shift, moving stiffly. Mason approached him near the dock. You shouldn't be lifting today. I know, Devin said, but the shift lead said we're still short. Not anymore. We've got 4 floaters coming in from Columbus starting this afternoon. Devin raised an eyebrow. Just like that? No, not just like that. I pulled 2 off light rotation and 2 from corporate logistics. It won't fix everything, but it should take pressure off until we hire more. Devin leaned on the cart. People are waiting to see if this sticks. They should. Mason stepped back and scanned the floor. The lights still flickered in 2 aisles. The water station had been replaced with a new unit, cold and clean, small steps, but visible ones. Around 3, Tasha flagged him down in the office. You've got about a dozen formal complaints submitted already. Most are about Chad. Some go back months. Mason nodded. Catalog them, make sure they're recorded. There's more. One of the complaints mentions that night shift was often clocked out early to avoid overtime payouts, but they were still made to finish the load. Who signed off on that? Tasha held up a printout. Chad and two assistant managers. Are the assistants still here? One of them called out yesterday, the other is on the schedule tonight. Have security escort him to HR when he clocks in. I want to hear his side, but he doesn't touch the floor again until I do. Tasha hesitated. You're moving fast. This place doesn't have time for slow. By the end of the day, the atmosphere was shifting. Not hopeful yet, but less resigned. People moved with a little more assurance. The portable fans Mason had ordered arrived and were set up near the heat-heavy areas. A sign-up sheet for feedback meetings was posted near the break room. At 6:30, Mason stood again in front of the crew as the evening shift wrapped up. I'm not promising miracles, he said, but I am promising this: I will not disappear, I will not delegate this to someone else. And I will not stop until this warehouse is something we can all take pride in again. He stepped aside as the shift clocked out. A few nodded at him. One offered a quiet thanks. It wasn't a win, not yet, but it was movement. Later that night, Mason sat alone in the small office Chad used to occupy. He looked out through the narrow glass window at the floor below, at workers finishing tasks without being barked at new fans humming quietly in the corners, at a space that had begun to feel less punishing. There was still a long way to go, but the silence in the office no longer felt like avoidance. It felt like responsibility. Mason arrived at Warehouse 7 before sunrise the next Monday, parking in the far corner of the lot where the asphalt dipped slightly from years of truck wear. The morning air was cold enough to sting his lungs, and the sky hadn't yet shaken off the haze. He stood outside for a minute, watching the first wave of workers shuffle through the employee entrance. They moved slower than the week before. Some still wore visible fatigue in their shoulders, others kept their eyes low as they passed him. He didn't greet them. Not yet. He just watched. Inside, the warehouse still carried the weight of old routines. The flickering lights in the back aisles had been replaced over the weekend. The new fans hummed steadily near the loading docks. But the tension, though thinner, hadn't disappeared. People still hesitated before speaking up. The internalized habits of staying quiet, of pushing through pain, of not being seen, those didn't vanish in a week. At 7, Mason met privately with the assistant manager who'd been removed from the floor the previous Friday. His name was Colin, a man in his early 30s with the kind of clipped tone that came from years of learning how to say the right thing while dodging responsibility. I didn't clock people out without authorization, Colin said, sitting stiffly in the small conference room. Chad gave the order, I just followed it. You knew it was wrong. I didn't want to lose my job. You kept workers here off the clock, that's theft of time. Colin looked away. That's how it's been done here for a while, not anymore. Mason didn't fire him on the spot. He suspended him with pay pending further investigation. He wanted the paper trail airtight, no shortcuts, no gray zones. Later that morning, he walked the floor again, not with a clipboard or agenda, but just to listen. Devin was on modified duty now, assigned to inventory logging at a mobile workstation. The new occupational health rep had reviewed his condition and cleared it for 2 weeks. Several others had quietly stepped forward with similar requests. Mason passed a row of outbound pallets and saw a young man rewrapping the corner of a damaged box. He crouched beside him. Wraps torn, the worker said without looking up. Shift before us left this one loose. What's your name, Lewis? You've been here long, 6 months. You thinking about staying? Lewis paused, then stood. His hands were rough from tape burns and a healing scab ran along his forearm. I was planning to leave. I've got a cousin in Columbus who said his warehouse pays better, but my mom's sick. I need to stay local. What would keep you here? Lewis studied him for a moment. Consistency, not having to guess if I'm going to be told I'm too slow every other day. Not having to fix someone else's mess and then get blamed when the load's late. Mason nodded. You'll get consistency, but I need accountability from everyone. That includes calling out problems early, not just fixing them quietly. Lewis gave a small nod and went back to work. By midweek, the first changes started to take hold. not in sweeping statements but in subtle shifts. The HR liaison, Tasha, held private check-ins with each team. Feedback came in waves, some of it raw, some of it hesitant. One worker had been clocking double shifts without reporting fatigue. Another had been quietly covering for a coworker who couldn't read the load sheets. That led to a deeper discovery. Several of the newer hires couldn't read English well enough to follow the labeling protocols, and no one had ever asked. Mason called a meeting with operations and HR that afternoon. "We're posting visual load guides in Spanish and Vietnamese first thing tomorrow. And we're building a training module for supervisors to identify language barriers, not ignore them." One of the HR reps raised a concern. "That's going to take time to implement across all sites." "I don't care how long it takes across all sites," Mason said. "Start with this one, finish here, then expand." That night, he visited Harper at her sister's apartment. The building was on the east side of town, above a discount pharmacy. When the door opened, Harper was standing with crutches under her arms. Her face looked better, less pale, more centered, but her movements were still cautious. "You walking on that?" Doctor said short distances are okay. "I'm not rushing it." Her sister hovered in the background but didn't interrupt. Mason sat on the edge of an old sofa. "I wanted to tell you what's happening. I thought you deserved that." Harper sat across from him, her ankle propped up on a pillow. "I've heard a few things from people still on the floor. Then I'll fill in the rest. Chad's gone, Colin's suspended, we've brought in a safety consultant. Pay reviews start next week. We're rewriting onboarding protocols. And I'm staying on site until the new leadership is fully trained." Harper watched him carefully. "You're not just patching this up, are you? Because that's what everyone expects. Fix it enough to look better, then move on." "I'm not patching anything, I'm rebuilding it." From the floor up, she looked down at her leg. "I passed out because I didn't think I could ask for help. That's not just a broken system, that's a broken culture, I know. Don't just fix the rules, fix what made people afraid to speak." "I am." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Harper asked, "What happens to the next person who speaks up, when you're not around?" "That's why I'm building a structure that doesn't rely on me being there. We're implementing rotating peer audits, monthly safety reviews, a direct line to HR that bypasses warehouse leadership. And I'm installing a feedback kiosk downstairs where reports can be submitted anonymously. Not a suggestion box, a reporting channel." Harper gave a slow nod. "You're serious." "I wasn't before, I am now." As he left the building, he passed a man on the stairwell carrying groceries. He nodded politely, then disappeared into the hallway. Mason stood for a moment outside, hands in his coat pockets, before heading back to the car. Thursday, the new interim floor supervisor arrived. Her name was Renee, a former shift lead from the Louisville site. She was sharp, calm, and had a reputation for handling pressure without losing her crew. Mason introduced her at the morning huddle. "She's here to run the floor, not run over people. Give her your respect and she'll return it." Renee didn't waste time. That morning, she reorganized the inbound schedule to better stagger heavy loads and reduce the peak hour strain by rerouting overflow. She didn't raise her voice once. She didn't need to. By Friday, the warehouse felt different, not fixed, not healed, but steadier. The chaos had been replaced by structure, the silence by cautious dialogue. Workers who'd stayed silent for months now asked questions. Others watched, measuring if this change would hold. At 5:30, Mason stood in the back corner of the warehouse, near the emergency exit where he'd first seen Harper collapse. The floor was quieter now. The last pallets were being sealed and Renee was talking with a small group near the dock. Tasha walked up beside him, holding a clipboard. "You sticking around another week?" "No, I'm leaving Monday. You trust it's ready to stand. It's not ready to run, but it doesn't need me hovering anymore. It needs consistency." She flipped through her notes. "Anything you want me to pass along to the corporate team?" "Yeah." "Tell them the next time they want to understand what's happening on the ground, they should come stand on it." As the last warehouse door rolled down, Mason walked toward the exit, not as a man escaping a mess, but as someone who'd finally stepped into it. He didn't leave with applause. He didn't need to. He left with the weight of something repaired the right way, not quickly, not loudly, but thoroughly. From the inside out.